Menards is a giant home improvement store chain. Its founder, John Menard Jr., is a billionaire several times over. Forbes says he's the 142nd richest man in the world. Save big money. He's also the richest man in the state of Wisconsin. And he's well known in Wisconsin, not just for being the richest man in the state, and not just for his chain of hardware stores with their inescapable jingle, but also for his many and long-running battles with the state's environmental cops. 10 years ago, the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources said they had more problems with John Menard and his company than with any other Wisconsin company. They cited John Menard and his company Menards at least 13 times over 3 decades for ignoring or violating state pollution and hazardous waste regulations. At one point, the state caught Mr. Menard himself on video, and this is true, personally dumping arsenic-laden hazardous waste ashes from one of his lumber plants into a state landfill. Personally. Instead of paying for the stuff to go to a hazardous materials facility, apparently John Menard would bag up the waste and bring it home to his house and put it in his personal trash at home. So instead of going to the hazardous material facility, it would just go into the landfill. John Menard ended up paying a $1.7 million fine for that, which at the time was a record for Wisconsin. So that's John Menard Jr. Save big money. Here's what Michael Isikoff has just reported about John Menard and his brand new starring role in American national politics. In 2012, when Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker was engaged in a bitter recall election that he ultimately won, John Menard Jr. donated more than $1.5 million. $1.5 million to a pro-Scott Walker group that promised that it would keep its donors totally anonymous. They accepted unlimited donations of any size from anyone, even from corporations, and they said they would keep those donations secret forever. John Menard Jr. reportedly gave $1.5 million to that group to support Scott Walker, but to support Scott Walker secretly. Since then, since Scott Walker won that recall election, things have gone pretty well for John Menard Jr. in his dealings with Wisconsin state government. His company has been awarded up to $1.8 million in tax breaks from the state. That alone recoups the donation. The Walker administration has sharply scaled back the kind of environmental enforcement actions that have plagued John Menard and his company more than any other company in the state for years. Now, to be clear, there is no bribery investigation here. Scott Walker is not being investigated for any sort of quid pro quo. Governor Walker's spokesperson today gave us a detailed explanation, making the case that everything about the way John Menard Jr. was treated by the Scott Walker administration can be explained just by normal politics. Nothing scandalous about this at all. But the fact remains that John Menard Jr. tried to secretly give more than $1.5 million to elect Scott Walker, and subsequently he received very favorable treatment from Scott Walker and Wisconsin state government. And yes, those things may not at all be connected in any way that is criminal or even stinky, but we were never supposed to know about the donations in the first place. And part of the reason we may know about them now is because of the trailing ends of an ongoing criminal investigation in Wisconsin into Scott Walker's campaign donations. That investigation has been working its way through the courts in Wisconsin. The case is going to be heard before the Wisconsin State Supreme Court next month. And Governor Walker and his campaign team have successfully argued thus far to the press corps that this investigation, the other hometown investigations trailing behind Scott Walker, they should just be seen as parochial Wisconsin issues that will be of no interest to the nation. Certainly of no interest to the national press corps, because this is just, you know, hometown stuff. Usual hometown enemies going after local politicians for the usual partisan stuff. And that works when you are just the governor of Wisconsin and the national press is only mildly interested in you at a distance. But when you are a top-tier presidential contender, investigative reporters with serious national chops start looking at everything trailing behind you as you try to become president. And because these investigations are still trailing him in Wisconsin, the story of Scott Walker is going to end up being way more interesting in future months than it has been recently, particularly if he stays at the top of the pack.